why
What
is
is
this
the scene in the trailer, Shay?
the burning down of the bar?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that it just felt like he's like they're not scared of us. They're not gonna do anything. They're not scared of us. He sounds like Mike Tyson for some reason in the movie.
No,
that was Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy does the high pitched American. Where are you from, voice?
I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight him. I'm gonna fight him.
I never
right
understood
now.
that scene. First of all, that scene where he burns because the building had no relation to what happens in it. None. It was just a spot that violence came down, but it wasn't owned by some other biker gang. It was just, and it's like, who are you sending this message to?
Vroom, vroom, and welcome to the movie podcast review of The Bikeriders. My name is Shahbaz, and joining alongside me is my ragtag team of hooligans, I would say. We have our own gang patches and jackets that we're getting made right now. We're not wearing them yet because by law we're not allowed to. I'm joined by Daniel, or as they call him, One-Eye Daniel.
Vroom, vroom, everybody. It's like One-Eye Daniel. Should I cover it? Should I just wink? I don't know what I should do. I feel like I should go get my denim jacket. There's an alarming lack of denim on the movie podcast right now.
The only problem is your denim jacket though is diamond encrusted on the back, which I don't think is very sinister though.
Yeah, but those were the movie podcast ones that we all decided on, and now they're not cool enough for it.
And it says interview. Disco Dan on the back of it. I don't know. I don't know if that's
the little portrait of him doing
my bike name.
Sorry, what was that? Your original
Dan?
You're the emoji. You're just that disco emoji.
Me all diamond encrusted. Hey man, I would not mess with somebody who had that jacket on 100%. If they were in a bike gang and they were called Disco Dan, I am not dancing with you, my friend. I'm good.
Most people that wear jackets or any type of clothes, I don't really mess with them, I just stay away. I'm not going to pick a fight with you.
You just keep to yourself. You just, okay, that's good.
Of course.
You mess with the people who don't wear the clothing?
Yeah, if you're naked, I can see your weak spots, I can see where I can attack. I know, I'm like, oh, yeah? And I can go right for the armpit or something, It's easier. Everything else is concealed with the clothes.
Sure, it's true.
And of course, we have the troublemaker of them all, probably the Austin Butler of our group here, Anthony. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah. That's my Austin Butler voice.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I'm glad you just didn't do Fade Rothra, though, just in case. Oh, gosh.
God, it's awful. Or like a mix of like Elvis as well, You got to have a little Elvis in there too.
Shit, what would your name be? What do you think your bike riding name would be?
The Snake, I think, because it's my fear. It's what I'm afraid of.
You must become what you fear. I think that's what it is.
True.
100%.
That's true.
Yeah.
Daniel, you'd be the spider.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Anthony, what would you be? The mongoose.
No, man. I'm a lone wolf, so I'll be the lone wolf.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my my spirit animal. Always a wolf, even though I don't feel like a wolf, but I'll be a wolf.
What do you feel
I love to imagine myself being something I'm not, but
he's more of a Morkie right now.
I'm a Morkie dog. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, how are you guys doing today? We're about to review The Bikeriders, directed by Jeff Nichols, and this movie has had such a interesting distribution strategy. I feel like for so long we were seeing, it was going to Disney with their Searchlight pictures, and then out of nowhere, Focus Features came in. We're like, no, actually, we'll scoop it up from you guys. So Universal and Focus started distributing it. Yeah, how are you guys doing today, though?
I'm excited to talk about this film because, like you said, it's been such an interesting, lead up to the release of this movie. We had the premiere of it at a film fest. Was it Telluride last year? It's been almost a year since this movie has really been in the collective minds of people. So yeah, it was supposed to come out in December. Now we're talking about in June. It's also coming out a week after this astronomical box office of Inside Out. So I'm really curious to see how it's all going to net out in the long run for it. But I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Anthony, what about yourself?
This is a movie that's been on my mind for a bit because we've heard about it. We've seen it go through its trials, trying to get out, then being kept in, and then the strike happening and all that. So, I was excited to watch it, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Of course, The Bike Riders will be exclusively in theaters June 21st. And again, we want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Focus Features for inviting us to watch this movie. You can follow us at The Movie Podcast on every single social media platform out there. And you can join our Discord as well down below. All the links are there. We're having some great discussions. People are joining in every couple of days. So it's a really nice party in there. We'll open up some rooms, probably not for The Bike Riders, but a lot of good movies coming out like Deadpool and Wolverine. So definitely stay tuned for that as well. Daniel, do you want to go ahead and give us your first reactions for The Bike Riders?
I would love to. And yeah, this is a film that's we've been waiting, like we said, for a long time for, Shay. And I think you brought up an interesting point, something that I wanted to bring up too with The Drop, because I got a lot of vibes of movies like The Drop, like Lawless, which are both two Tom Hardy films, and Black Mass, where it's like, here are these movies that are advertised in a very certain way. You have this narration leading through it, and again, you could tell, you see the inspirations for The Bike Riders. They wear it on their sleeve. Like if you've seen a Martin Scorsese film, there's shades of Tarantino in there too. This feels like it feels like almost like a melding pot of every single type of gangster type of narration film that you got in here. I was almost waiting at one point for like the way this film starts, because it starts at a later point in the movie and then comes back. I was waiting for it to literally go, you may be wondering how I got here. And not saying that The Bike Riders is like that level of cheese or corniness, but it felt like it was using so many cliches from films that we've seen before that I wouldn't be surprised if that showed up here, if it showed up here. But I will say this: I really like the world that The Bike Riders creates. I think it's fascinating to tell a story about a bike riding gang. Obviously, fans of Sons of Anarchy know that they had multiple seasons of that show and they see the success of it. And when you cast two people like Austin Butler and Tom Hardy, I think you really are going to expect, a tour de force of performances. And I think what ended up happening for me in this is that you got a lot more laid back Tom Hardy, and you got a Austin Butler who was on screen, who I honestly felt Austin Butler was only in this film to look cool at some moments. And he does. He's the coolest looking dude in this movie, and I love that. I just wish that he was given a little bit more to work with. You also have Jodie Comer, whose story is really leading this film, where we have Mike Faist, who is just
recording it, I guess.
Yeah, recording this film. So we're getting it through a series of interviews, but he's just also kind of there, and he's also somebody who I think is so recognizable now, coming off of Challengers, coming off West Side Story, that I'm like, oh, it's kind of strange that you're just literally in the corner of a room for so much of this movie, where we're not getting any real development of what you're doing and what's happening. And I think that's my biggest problem for The Bike Riders with me, that it never really feels like it's has any urgency. There's no real gas behind the pedal pushing it forward. It feels like we're just coasting and cruising down the road with it. And yes, the world is really cool, and yeah, these characters are, the story that's being told is, it's interesting, but it also doesn't feel like it's really telling the story of how this gang came to be. It really is just a series of events being told to us. Once you take away the framework of this story of, here's a reporter telling the story of what happened years ago, which I don't think is the strongest, entry into a movie, you're left with Austin Butler and Tom Hardy, who feel like for a lot of the time they are on just autopilot. They are there to look the part, but I didn't really get anything else from them. And I was leaving a little disappointed, because I was really hopeful for this film. I really wanted to leave this movie in the same way that I left, Challengers, where I'm like, I want to know more about the world of tennis, or Gran Turismo, where I want to know more about the world of racing, or even something like Red Dead Redemption, where never do I want to live in the world of, of the West and that time period, but damn, do I want to be a cowboy. And I really wanted to feel like, this biker gang, I think there was so much love and attention that could have been brought here. And I just felt that I never really felt leaving that I gained anything from the story that was being told. And I feel like there was a stronger story here. We just didn't see it.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of great points, and a lot of those I want to touch on as well, because it's been about a week or so since we watched this film, and I'm kind of sitting with it in an area where I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I really liked in this movie. I really liked how it looked, for example. I liked the actors in it. We're getting a really good list of people just off the top, the three mains. You have Jodie Comer, Tom Hardy, and of course Austin Butler, who I think each bring something very interesting. I did not expect this to be Jodie Comer's film, really. Like I didn't think that she was the one that was going to be leading it,
right?
And the film would keep cutting back to a lot of her retelling the story to Mike, as you were saying. And I think that's kind of where I felt a little bit lost with the film myself. I think that if they maybe focused it a bit more on Tom and Austin and had Jodie also kind of retelling parts of the story, that'd be great. But every time it cuts back to Jodie, she's doing a great job and a great performance, but it really slows the film down because it's actually spending that time retelling the story, not even showing what's happening at some points, just like 5 or 6 minutes of her just talking, and you're like, okay, well, I kind of want to get back to some of the action or the drama that we were seeing before. But Anthony, please go ahead and let us know your first reactions for the Bike Riders.
My biggest thing was I thought I was going on a journey with these Bike Riders, very similar to like Easy Rider or even Sons of Anarchy, which is more modern. You kind of go on a journey with Bike Riders. It makes sense. They're on bikes, they're journeying around, and you involve this idea of a gang. So you kind of have Easy Rider meets Outsiders, and you create like this story that seems like it's going to translate well on screen, but then you get there and you're kind of bored, unfortunately, because the story is pretty bland. It falls flat. There's no romanticizing about these characters on screen, and that was my biggest thing. Like, if you're going to tell a story about bikers, I know this is based on a book and it's kind of like an inside look of what it means to be a bike rider. But I just felt like if you're going to put this on the big screen, you need to have some sort of gripping tale to get me excited about this world. It's like it takes place in 1967. So it has like this Outsiders feeling, but there's not much that happens. It's almost like a tamed idea of the bike rider. I don't know if that was the message. Like, these guys weren't Hell's Angels or whatever type of bike rider you would imagine in that time period. They're actually just lost dudes who came together because they had a love of biking. But I just don't think that's enough.
It's like updated greasers,
Definitely.
But there was not enough for you to be invested. And that was my thing. I just couldn't get invested in these characters, even though the performances were great. Tom Hardy, Jodie Comer, they had that Chicago accent. It just felt
like the Midwest accent.
They got that really well done. But the story was just like, why do you think this was something that people, like the general audience, would care about? You don't add any elements to it to make me invested in it. And then it just falls flat at the end.
It's kind of funny that you bring up The Outsiders, because that was also one of the movies that I was thinking about a lot too. And Daniel, I think that it's really interesting that you kind of bring up this idea of the movie doesn't really follow cliches of these sort of films, but at certain points in the movie, I kind of wish it did, because you feel like, okay, this is the story I'm about to get right now, which is going to be really interesting because I like these characters. But then that story never kind of comes. Like, you always expect that, Jodie Comer's character and Austin Butler's character are going to be in this really toxic and messy relationship, but they never kind of are.
No.
They're always just kind of like,
Austin Butler's just
together
standing around so much of this movie. He's just like, oh yeah, I guess we're a couple. I'm like, the whole time in the film, I'm like, are you guys a couple? Like, I don't really feel like you're a couple. You don't have
there's a lack of chemistry
with each
there.
Other. Like,
extremely. And also, Jodie just feels like a lot of times that she's getting upset or she's driving a situation forward. You're like, well, where is this really coming from? Because it kind of just feels out of the blue a little bit at some points. And that's why I kind of wish the movie leaned a bit more into the cliches, because then I feel like it could tell a more engaging story, because the characters in the film can be interesting, but they feel very just held back. And I'm not sure if they were held back because, this has some truth behind it and they wanted to make it as authentic to the real situations as possible. But I mean, it's a movie. You got to kind of keep us engaged. You really kind of keep us informed as to what's going on. And a movie that's sitting just under 2 hours, feeling like a 2.5 hour film.
Definitely does.
That's where it kind of also bothers me a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that also felt a little distracting in the film was like, again, we have a big cast in this film, obviously Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, but we also have people like Boyd Holbrook, we have Norman Reedus, we have Michael Shannon, we have like these big names who feel like they're almost cameos in the movie because they're there, but again, they never feel like they're really of any consequence to the story being told. So when Norman Reedus shows up, it's like, it feels like a big moment, but you're just like, oh, you're just kind of around as this movie's happening. It feels like they were just kind of on set while they were shooting the movie.
I thought they got like a Norman Reedus lookalike because the role felt so small for Norman Reedus. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt like that
while he was shooting his motorcycle show, he's like, hey guys, I didn't shave my beard for a little bit. I'm going to roll up into this movie. Same with Michael Shannon, who's obviously worked with this director multiple times on tons of projects. It's just interesting that these bigger names show up and they don't really have anything much to do. And then really the story that's kind of, being set up is that there's this younger gang who is trying to get into this gang, and Tom Hardy says no, and then eventually they kind of start showing up more and more and more.
But that happens so late. That happens so late into the movie.
Exactly. So like you're just trying to wonder, I'm like, okay, what is the story being told? And I think the story being told is literally just a concept of the movie where it's just, hey, here's a reporter recounting his events while he was hanging out with the gang. Whether that time with the gang was interesting or not, that is the story that we were told in this film. And I just feel like you have such an interesting premise. And even if this is based on true events, based off the book, you could spice it up a little bit to really make it a bit more interesting. Because I think what we know, like Anthony said, it was flat. And again, I'm trying to avoid, puns with flat tires and things like that. But it really just felt like listen, there's some cool moments in this movie. And I think the best way I could describe it is that it just feels like a Sunday afternoon movie. Like this movie would be on TV at 3:00 on a Sunday, and you'd be like, oh, I'm watching it halfway through to the end. That's the kind of vibe that I was getting watching this film.
It reminded me a lot of also when we watched Many Saints in Newark, where it's another movie where a lot of great scenes are happening, a lot of great moments in it. That film obviously is attached to a phenomenal show. The Bike Riders also feels like it could have been, coming from a TV show as well. It could have been
a Sons of Anarchy like prequel film.
Yeah, spin-off or prequel, whatever. I think this movie runs out of gas like 40 minutes in. It just kind of feels like, okay, I think we got it. What else are you trying to tell us here now? And there's some, interesting moments that happen throughout the film, but they just kind of feel like vignettes of random stages in their life. And when it jumps, different years, you kind of forget. You're like, wait, how long ago was the previous moment? Because they all still look kind of the same. It's only Jodie Comer's hair is changing slightly.
Her hair is the one that's the driving force and what year it is, right? And I think
time stamping it for us.
I think Austin Butler, again, as cool as he looks on screen, I think so much of this film also is just, where is he? He just feels like he feels like a side character in his own movie because he really doesn't have any urgency at all when you see him.
And I think Mike Faist's character should have been the one who was speaking for this whole movie, right? The very similar to Almost Famous. You're observing these gangs and these people through the eyes of someone who's not part of it. And as much as Jodie Comer is that person, she just I don't relate to her because she is still part of that world. Where Mike Faist is the photojournalist who's capturing everything that's happening. And he literally is put in different sequences where time has changed. You have a little key card at the bottom saying, hey, this is 1970, 1971. But the scenes that he's in is just, I felt like he almost only interviewed Jodie. He never interviewed anyone else.
The movie is just like, every scene is just like, hey guys, this is my microphone. I'm holding up the camera.
And then
so tell me the
story. He gives an explanation of what he does, but it's just, I think there should have been more development for him because then we could have used him as the bike to journey us into this world. He never gets caught up in the violence. He never gets caught up in that world. So, if we look at the Goodfellas, our central character, played by Ray Liotta, is that person, and we journey through him through the mafia, and I use Goodfellas because it very much is like Goodfellas without the shine.
Then we get Karen seeing it afterwards, the craziness of that world, and then how she gets just so naturally into it. With Jodie Comer in this film, that's exactly right, Anthony. Like you get it. She's part of it. Like nothing's weird to her anymore. Like even when she meets Austin Butler for the first time in the bar, it's just like, who's that? And then like, oh, that's
Trouble, Benny.
Benny in the movie, he knocks over his bike all the time, and then he just comes over and is like, "Hey, pretty mama, let's be together, you and me." And then it's just like that was it. And then they're just together.
You don't buy it though. You don't buy it because it happens so randomly and so quickly, and also I don't know what Jodie Comer is like. I'm like, oh, is she like really stuck up? Is she really like Midwestern where she's like super religious?
She felt like a mother figure to everyone. Yeah. I just couldn't picture her in that world where, like, I feel like you have the brains to like say, what the hell am I doing here? But you just stuck with it, and I couldn't understand, Austin Butler's character and her fascination with him because he didn't say anything, and the scenes that we get with them together, they just feel so disconnected. So I was trying to understand, where's the chemistry? Why does she like him? What does he bring to her that she doesn't have? Because all she felt like was a mother figure for everyone in this gang, and she felt more annoyed that she was part of it than really the romanticization of I was part of this world.
Right. One thing I will say though, the really the C plot or the D plot in this movie that gets introduced a lot later in it, where you have like this younger gang trying to get into this gang. I think that is the most interesting part of the story, because if you're looking at this motorcycle gang who apparently is just a gang who likes to get together and ride motorcycles, that is the extent of what
it's like us. It's just like us. They just like to record podcasts,
movies, right? It's interesting. That's like, okay, here are these guys that just want to get together, they want to hang out and ride bikes, and then you're like, in our head, for the way gangs are now, you're like, hold on, those gangs run drugs or run this or part of this. You get little hints of that in this movie where they're like, yeah, this chapter is starting to run this now and do this. You're like, hold on, can we go learn about them? Because how do you go from a gang that just rides bikes in a town to being a gang that is running drugs and running all of this other awful thing? So it almost gave me vibes of like, when you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2, again, bringing this up because I kept thinking about the idea of gangs. The whole premise of Red Dead Redemption is, this is the end of the cowboy era. This is the end of this era, the last few years of, the Wild West. And I feel like it would have been so much more interesting to explore that in this world of motorcycle gangs where we're learning about this gang and, it's the end of the good days of them just riding together before it turns into something else. And again, there's little glimpses of that in the Bike Riders, but I think that is just a buried, run over story that we never get in this movie, even though it is, right there for them to really operate on.
I mean, if you want to take that inspiration of Rockstar, you look at GTA 4, for example, The Lost and the Damned, an actual Bike Riders DLC that we were given that actually had a lot more interesting situations that were occurring. We had drug running and everything. And it's interesting because this movie, like, they're tough guys, I guess, but like, you don't know why that they're so tough. You don't understand what makes them so evil until one scene occurs, which is in the trailer, and it felt kind of off to me because I was like, oh, why?
What is the scene in the trailer, Shay?
The burning down of the bar.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That it just felt like he's like they're not scared of us. They're not gonna do anything. They're not scared of us. He sounds like Mike Tyson for some reason.
No,
that was Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy does the high pitched American. Where are you from, voice?
I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight him. I
never understood that scene. First of all, that scene where he burns because the building had no relation to what happens in it. None. It was just a spot that violence came down, but it wasn't owned by some other biker gang. It was just, and it's like, who are you sending this message to?
They were just regulars there. They were just a couple assholes that were regulars.
Tom Hardy was just a regular dude who got inspired watching the show that day. I'm like, so this dude's just a family dude. So is he fake? Like, is he just pretending to be tough, or is he not?
Yeah.
Like, they're just...
And that's the questions I wanted answered.
It was just really interesting that, again, I think technically this is a well-made film, but when you really start to pull apart the story that's being told, you're like, this isn't really a story that really feels like it was interesting enough to be turned into a movie.
I think it's fair to say that we can jump to our final recommendations for the Bike Riders. So if you want to go ahead and start, Anthony, please let us know, what is your final recommendation for the Bike Riders?
It is get on your bike and skip it.
And drive away.
Get on your bike and skip it, boy. That sounds like a threat.
Vroom.
You know, the one thing that I never felt that I think a bike riding movie should feel is living on the edge.
Yeah.
And I never felt that in this movie. And it's just, you know, riding a motorcycle is, you know, you're sealed with death in my eyes, because you're open to things, anything can happen, and you're just vulnerable. And I didn't feel like that. I didn't feel that these characters were living on the edge, vulnerable, living to their last minute for a bike riders movie. So it's a skip it for me.
Thank you for that. I think for myself, I'm going to say add to the queue, because I think that there's some enjoyment to be had if you're not looking for anything too deep, but I think you're going to get frustrated at the lack of depth that can occur in this movie. But there are some great moments that you kind of come across, and, you know, awesome Butler, Tom Hardy are great to look at as well. So definitely for that reason, I'd say kind of like what Daniel was also saying, it's like a Sunday night film. You just kind of have it on, or maybe you're on a flight and you're like, you know what, I've got 2 hours to kill. This is that kind of a movie. But for everybody else, you can probably just skip it. Daniel, please let us know what your final recommendation is for the Bike Riders.
Yeah, it's definitely a skip it in theaters. But like I was saying earlier, if you're looking for something to watch on a Sunday afternoon, or if you see that this is on a plane, this is exactly that type of movie. Give it a few minutes. If you're not invested in the first 10 minutes, I don't think it gets any really better from there. But yeah, that's for me. Skip it in theaters, but maybe check it out when it comes to a streaming service or when you don't have to pay to watch it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And of course, thank you to our friends over at Focus Features for inviting us to watch this movie and also for reviewing it. You can join our Discord to talk more about movies like this and anything else that's coming out. The links for all of that, plus our socials, is available down below. You can leave a comment here. You can also subscribe to us on almost every podcast platform out there. And for absolutely $0, you can go ahead and give us 5 stars. It really, really helps the show out. And it kind of keeps these lights and these mics on as well. If you do want to support us in other ways, we have our Patreon and a lot of cool things that will be coming out very, very soon. So stay tuned for that on our socials. Of course, that was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.